like that case we had recently where we need to determine whether or not this person's living at that house, and that's the primary objective. So if an opportunity arises finally where you can do that, even if it exposes one of you to the point where you think you have to be replaced, it's worth that. It's worth that process if that it gets you to your objective. So that risk reward concept is something that throughout your careers that you're going to constantly be balancing.
Could I jump in something?
Sure, go.
Okay, so if the subject see you twice in a day, like gas station and Forever 21, they see you twice, you're done. Don't go with the third.
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of different approaches to how you want to do it, your own personal style, your own comfort. I am familiar throughout my career of doing 5 days of surveillance, 60 plus hours with active surveillance. It can be done, right? Is it the best? Sometimes switching it up is good, but keep in mind from an operational standpoint, sometimes switching from one investigator to another also has a reset function. They have to learn, they have to adjust, they have to be aware. So I think if we're fully prepared technologically and experienced and committed, you can deal with a 3 to 5 day surveillance with a lot of activity. But to Calva's point, you have to be, it's whatever you're comfortable with. If you feel as though that you've overexposed yourself through those earlier interactions in the day, then that risk reward conversation comes into play.
I guess it would also matter like the area that you're in, because seeing someone twice in Vancouver, different parts of Vancouver, okay, that's a little more weird than seeing someone twice in a day in Abbotsford, right? I think it's a lot more likely.
So how many of you took transit today? Anybody? Okay. So when you were on the
Well, I saw her yesterday at the SkyTrain station, and then again when I got here, so I was like, huh. Right?
So when you're on the train,
West Coast Express, yeah.
Were you sitting beside somebody?
Well, my girlfriend and I took the train together.
Okay, so was there someone behind you, someone in front of you?
Yeah.
Do you remember what they looked like?
On the way home, but not so much on the way there.
Right, but do you remember what they looked like?
Kind of. I remember the guy that was talking on his phone a few seats back.
Right.
But yeah, if they're just
But
quiet,
tomorrow, would you
nothing.
recognize them
Oh, God,
at
no.
the gas station?
No.
Right. That's so recognizing people. I think there's the notion of patterns and how we behave is more so that I think the focus is how do you interact. If you're status quo, if you're moving with the flow of the world around you and doing things that are just normal and not sticking out, then you're less memorable. I would challenge anybody to remember anybody. I could be in an elevator full of really goofy looking weird people, but if they're just standing there 2 days later, an hour later, will I remember any of them? Could I draw a pic? No way I can. It's impossible. Our minds aren't capable of retaining that. Unconsciously, I think there's something there to be said. So as that unconscious awareness by being close to somebody comes, there will be a tipping point where now, hey, I recognize you. Some of us, maybe some of you, certainly me, I have a knack for faces. I don't forget a face for the rest of my life. I may not remember the name, and it takes me a while to connect it, but I have that experience where daily I'll go through, I've seen that person, I don't know where, and sometimes I can place them, but I don't forget faces. So, but that's sort of an accumulation of having to ID people and having to be aware of people, and it's an acumen you'll play, and then it's somewhat of not a burden, but I mean, I will see people and go, how do I know that person all day long, like trying to figure it out. It could just be an elevator, it could be, usually it's a little bit stronger connection when I have that feeling rather than, I've seen that person in the neighborhood, but I come downtown, and I lived downtown for years, and I see people in neighborhoods. Peter and I were in Kits on Monday, just having some lunch after coming here, and I see people in the neighborhood I'd seen for 20 years. I recognize them right away. And they're older, right? They're different, but they still recognize them. So anyhow, that's, something that I think if you're good with recognizing people will serve you well in the industry.
And how much attention you're paying to them, right? Like if you're in a store shopping and you're staring at them, that's different than if you're going about your business, right?
Yeah, the
Some people
unconscious
can feel
awareness
that.
versus the conscious awareness. And even when they're conscious, there's a lot of science around remembering faces. I remember one 60 Minutes piece where they turned the faces upside down of celebrities. Like, you can try it. You take a picture and you flip their face literally 180 degrees and just like their whole head upside down. Do it and try it. I should get a slide where, and who's this celebrity? And you're like, I don't know, like they're not the same person that you would immediately recognize. We're talking A-list celebrities where they do that. So there's a phenomenon with identification, and it is, you know, it is one of the hardest things, one of the most important things. And once you ID people, I say to investigators that I work with, it's for me the response is, when it comes to identification, when I finally see somebody, it's like, yes, it's a visual feeling of, yes, that's the person. And it doesn't always necessarily relate to what I've seen before, but it's just that feeling of, okay, this makes sense, versus we talked about it yesterday, about wanting that person to be that person, right? Oh, they went here and they did this, oh, geez, I really hope it's them, and you're conspiring your mind to go, well, yeah, it could be, and you have a picture, you're like, well, it could be a little bit thinner, a little bit older, like, you know what I mean? And you're trying to justify the wanting of what you've seen for whatever the reason to make it fit. And when you're doing that, I'd say 90% of the time you're wrong. And there's a danger in that, like in policing, it's like you create this story and it feels good and it fits, but it's not always accurate, and it's dangerous to make those assumptions. So my narrative sort of leaded me by this person looking older than they actually were to conclude that it was his father or somebody older than he was, and it wasn't. It was a subject.